All right, we're going live. 1, 2. I can go. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Abby. How are you?
I'm doing well today. How you doing?
I'm okay. It's getting exhausting following the news here, though, isn't it?
Oh my God! It's like the news cycle. It's always quick, and now it's like tremendously fast.
Yeah, we think that we're just reeling over a political crisis here in Israel, and then we get a BDS move against our economy.
I love AIRBNB. I am so upset. I love using AIRBNB. It is really so upsetting. All right, so what's your insight into this? For those of you who are not familiar, AIRBNB, this fabulous website that really changed the whole vacation hotel industry on its head, allowing everyone to just put up their apartments, houses up for rental, vacation, overnight, a week, 2 weeks, whatever. They have now decided that to go follow the BDS, the anti-Israel direction, and they are removing all 200, I think it's 200, rental vacation homes in Judea and Samaria.
No. Only Jewish ones.
Jewish ones, thank you. Yes, all Jewish.
All Jewish-owned Airbnb rentals that are posted by Jews in Judea and Samaria. The Palestinians are, they don't have a problem with that. But by the way, Jews can't rent the Palestinian Airbnb because we're not allowed into areas A and B because we'll be killed. Right. So we're barred from entering their areas by virtue of our religion and our nationality, but they don't have any problem keeping those up. And I think one of the important things to notice here is just how overtly anti-Semitic it is. And because that also tells you about the nature of the BDS movement in general. So first of all, they said they don't want to allow Jews to post on Airbnb their vacation rentals here because the area is disputed.
Right, disputed.
Right, but they don't have any trouble posting Turkish-owned vacation homes for rent on Airbnb in northern Cyprus, or Moroccan-owned rentals for rent in Western Sahara. Because these are areas that are disputed where the
officially according to international law,
where actually the claim of the Turks in particular for northern Cyprus is non-existent, right? And so they have no claim to sovereignty over it. They simply were an invasion force in the 1970s. They invaded northern Cyprus, kicked out much of the local population, repopulated it with their own population. And they've been occupying it ever since. And there's no problem renting vacation homes, listing vacation homes owned by Turks in northern Cyprus.
And that's why it's so easy for us to say it's anti-Semitic, because you see a clear double standard against Jews versus everyone else.
Well, there are two double standards here. The first double standard is that in areas around the globe that have similar legal situations, there's no boycott. The second thing is that they're not boycotting non-Jewish owned homes in Judea and Samaria. And these are homes that are not available for Jewish rentals. So what Airbnb is doing is saying that Judea and Samaria has to be Yud and Ryan. That as a result of this dispute, no Jews are allowed. No Jews are allowed to participate in this business, and no Jews are allowed to, and they're posting things that no Jews are allowed to rent. Okay? So this is pure anti-Semitism. This is an open, overt act of anti-Jewish bigotry and discrimination. And that's why I think, and the thing is, and the reason why it's so painful, right, is because this is really a very excellent company, and a lot of people, a lot of Israelis, have opened up like a side business to supplement their income by listing rooms or apartment units, basement apartments and other things that they have on Airbnb. So if in Judea and Samaria it's 200 like that, all of Jerusalem, half of the hotel market now is Airbnb.
Right.
And what's next? They're going to start delisting homes in Jerusalem, in Har Choma, and in Gilo, and in French Hill. What are they going to do? They're going to do that.
What about the Golan?
And obviously the Golan Heights, that should be the next thing. But, the whole point here is that this is pure and, unadulterated anti-Semitism. This is pure discrimination, which is why I think that the calls for boycott are fine. and important, and Jews throughout the world should be boycotting Airbnb, but I think that this is also a cause for litigation. I know this happened yesterday evening, and I haven't had an opportunity to really, research this. I know that the Kohelet Forum is on this, NGO Monitor is on this, Human Rights Watch, so-called, the self-appointed arbiters of claiming that Jews have no right to self-determination or freedom because they are not a human rights organization. They're an anti-Semitic organization, Human Rights Watch. So they've really been propelling this forward. But I think that Israel has to litigate. I think that Israel has to sue, or individual operators of B&Bs in Judea and Samaria that are being delisted because they're Jews. I think that they have to sue Airbnb in the appropriate court for anti-Semitic discrimination and sue the pants off of them. This can be a class action suit. Whatever it is, Airbnb, it's not enough. It's important to boycott Airbnb, but it's not enough. And by the way, you're harming the livelihood of Israelis who operate on the, who operate their side business through this business. So it's very problematic. I mean, there are Israelis who make significant supplemental income through Airbnb rentals in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, in Haifa, in the Golan Heights, all over this country. And so this is disgusting because it puts you between a rock and a hard place. You have your family business, and then you have pure anti-Semitism. So I think that while boycotts are very important, the most important thing here is litigation. I think that they have to be sued. They have to be sued for discriminatory practices. And, we have, and I'm sure that it's happening, that the legal, authorities, and I wouldn't even waste my time with our stupid government, which we can get to in a second. But I mean, this is a significant, this is illegal. It's also, by the way, illegal under the anti-BDS legislation that's been passed by something like 26
now. Half of American states have passed anti-BDS legislation.
So, that's the other thing is that, states should be made aware of the fact that Airbnb is now openly discriminating against Jews as Jews. And there are two other points here that are being, so first of all, Airbnb has to be sued. It should be sued in as many forms as possible. It should be tied up in lawsuits from here until kingdom come or until they cry uncle. And also give restitution to Israel in some form for their open anti-Semitism, that they have embraced it.
Right.
They have to be made to pay a huge price, regulatory price in the United States, tort price in lawsuits, and they should take a hit in their public image. And by the way, the most important thing in all of this is that they need competitors.
Right.
We need to organize the tech geniuses in Israel and wherever need to be organizing an alternative to Airbnb, which is an anti-Semitic company.
And this brings in the whole tech world right now. We have problems with Facebook. We have problems with Google, with YouTube, Airbnb. It's all trying to find.
But one thing that I want to say about that is that I don't know. One thing that I want to say about the Airbnb thing also is that what we see here is what a total and complete lie this is, that this is about Israel's policy in Judea and Samaria. This is about discriminating against Jews as Jews. Again, they're not delisting non-Jewish owned B&Bs from their website. Only Jewish B&Bs. And one of the sick things about this whole BDS thing is that they, and not just the BDS, the general left-wing push against Israel, is that they try to differentiate between Jews. So they say, leftist Jews in the United States, they should have civil rights because they're all on our side and they're all anti-Israel, right? But Jews who are on the right, Jews who, God forbid, are religious, they have no rights. And by the way, that, I could go on and on with the hypocrisy of the American Jewish left. Like, for instance, they scream that they need to have an egalitarian Western Wall, but they say nothing about the abject discrimination against Jews on the Temple Mount. Right? And so, they want the right to have egalitarian prayer at the Western Wall, but they don't want Jews to even be allowed to go up to the Temple Mount, let alone have the right to pray in any form.
Right.
So, and Christians too, they have no problem with that. So that's it. But I'm saying that the BDS movement is impacting Jews. It's against Jews. It's an anti-Semitic movement, and this Airbnb action proves it. It proves just how discriminatory it is. And, as my colleague and friend Eugene Kontorovich at the Kohelet Forum has been tweeting about this.
Yeah, he's an international lawyer.
Right, and law professor. And he's one of the most knowledgeable people on this issue. He said that what this also shows is, there have been severe human rights breaches in northern Cyprus and in western Sahara.
Right, both occupied according to international law.
and by or disputed. And by ignoring them and then claiming that you're for human rights by banning Jews from your website, what you're showing is that you really don't care about human rights at all. That this has nothing to do with human rights. That anybody who has his human rights harmed by non-Jews or allegedly harmed, because Jews aren't actually harming anybody's human rights in Judea and Samaria. That's all part of the anti-Semitic lie about what's going on here. But people who have actual human rights breaches, who are actually, harming people as human beings, are not being punished, which shows that this is actually something that aids and abets human rights abusers. Because if you abuse human rights while not being Jewish, in the land of Israel. And by the way, again, Jews aren't harming the human rights of the Palestinians. That's just a lie. Right. The whole thing is a lie. We're being punished, but, everybody else gets off scot-free.
And, okay, go.
No, I think that, this is showing the very nature of the BDS movement. And one of the things, anyway, you go on, because I want to just get back to what's happening in America.
Okay, so my final question about a point you brought up and you touched upon, one of the organizations that spearheaded this anti-Semitic act by Airbnb is Human Rights Watch, showing that specific organization in and of itself is not about human rights, because as you mentioned, it's going against and not standing up for actual human rights abuses taking place around the world.
Look, I'm telling you, Abby, we're in a world where lies prevail, where you have all of these anti-American and anti-Jewish organizations that parade themselves around as human rights movements or organizations, when they're exactly the opposite. They're not about protecting anybody's human rights, certainly not the Palestinians, whose particular human rights, abuses, the main ones that they suffer from, or really the only ones that they suffer from, are at their own hands.
Right.
And so, at least in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, the people who are repressing them are their own rulers, who they chose.
Right. Right. Now,
so we're in this world of lies, where we're constantly told that these self-styled human rights organizations care about human rights, when their entire agenda is to deny Jews rights. It's to deny Jews the right of self-determination, is to deny Jews the right to self-defense, is to deny Jews the right to their national heritage, and to transfer all of those to enemies who want to annihilate them. So this is the world of lies that we're living in. That's the occupying force. The occupying force are these organizations that pretend to care about human rights, when all they really want to do is harm Jews.
Right. I even say the following: the peace activists and the human rights activists, they are actually the war activists, because by them ignoring the true evils and covering up for them, they're the ones enabling the conflict and the violence and even wars to continue on and not stopping them.
Right, and then this really just leads us to the issue of the Democratic Party.
U.S. elections, let's go. We just had the midterms.
I wrote this article last week, and I saw it in the Jerusalem Post 2 weeks ago. I don't remember anymore.
Last week. 2 weeks ago?
Whatever. It was like a week and a half ago.
Yeah. So it was a great analysis, and you're gonna follow up on that analysis of the U.S. midterm elections.
So it was way too optimistic, and in a way I was embarrassed when they put it up on Real Clear Politics the other day, because I was much too optimistic. Look, I saw the election results on paper, right, and you see that the radicals, the anti-Semites, not radicals, the anti-Semitic Democratic politicians, that's Anastasio Cortez, Ocasio-Cortez, whatever her name is,
AOC.
And then the woman from Minnesota, and the other woman from Omar,
two Muslim women,
and the woman from Detroit or wherever, from Michigan. They're out and out anti-Semites, but they won in districts where there is no Republican Party,
right.
and the local population is extremely leftist.
Right.
But in all of the districts where you had a much more moderate constituency, Texas, Florida. Other places, when you had radicals running, they lost.
Right.
And the people who won on the Democratic side, the reason why the Democrats were able to reassert their majority in the House of Representatives is because they ran moderate candidates. And oftentimes those moderate candidates also defeated more radical candidates in the primary. So I thought, when I was looking at these results, I said, well, this is great because, all right, so I would have preferred if the Republicans had maintained control over both houses of the Congress because Republicans are more pro-Israel.
Right.
But the real threat to the United States is the radical takeover of the Democratic Party, just as happened in Britain and to a certain degree is happening in Israel as well.
Correct.
And so, I think that the most pressing issue, if you will, for American resilience over time is that the moderates take back the Democratic Party because that's the only way that you go back to having a functioning system. You can't have a functioning system when one of two parties in a two-party system is embracing anti-Americanism as a rallying cry, and that's what we see with the open borders stuff. And with the identity politics stuff, all of these things, they're inherently opposed to the foundational ideas of the United States of America.
And especially the embrace of Antifa.
Right. Well, that's the thing, right?
Right. And there's actually an embrace. There are some of these Democratic
right. So what I wrote a week and a half ago in the Jerusalem Post, when it was called "What America Voted For," or something like that. I said that, the moderate rise of the Democratic Party is the first time that you've seen the radical wing of the Democrats suffer a significant defeat since 2006.
Right.
So
that's the good part.
That was what I thought. But then I'm looking at the headlines and I'm looking at all the stories and I'm seeing that Ocasio-Cortez joined a sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office of, Antifa people or whatever, the other day on the Hill. It wasn't Antifa.
No, it was Sunshine, some climate change group.
And that they did another one in some moderate Democrat congressman's office who's from California, I think. And so they're doing direct action to intimidate the moderates in the House to vote with them. And it's working.
Right.
And it's working for two reasons. One is because they're in their faces and these people are afraid. I mean, we saw what they're doing to people who are going out to dinner and outside their home, what they did to Tucker Carlson. Then they attacked his daughter at a restaurant. And, so he's on the Republican side. They'll do this against the Democrats as well.
Right.
And, so people are intimidated. They're scared of these people, and rightly so.
Right.
So that's one thing. And the other thing is, frankly, they owe their elections to them because it's true that they're moderates and they won their primaries as moderates, but they won their general election because these people supported them in the polls. So that they need them. And they probably also got a lot of money during the election from these radical groups. So that even if they're moderate, they're being pushed to the radical positions on climate change, on borders, and on Israel.
Right.
So that's why I think that even though the moderates won, because the American constituents are more moderate, all of the money and the energy in the Democratic Party now is coming from the radicals. And so just on the basis of the money, and just on the basis of the fact of these like gangs, who are radical and don't have a problem using violence against people, and they are using violence against people. I consider battering the door of Tucker Carlson while his wife is hiding in the pantry, to be violence.
Right, and if that's not stopped, it'll escalate.
Well, it isn't stopping, and it is escalating. They're going everywhere. We saw this also. By the way, this isn't new. This is what ACORN, which is one of the organizations that catapulted Barack Obama to the leadership of the Democratic Party and to the presidency. This is what they did against bank managers in the early 2000s. I mean, one of the primary causes of the 2008 subprime crisis that caused the economic recession in the United States and much of the Western world was owed to these direct actions by Acorn that were intimidating bank managers throughout the United States to give loans to low-income families that couldn't repay them. And then they were selling these bad loans in the subprime market.
I didn't know that part about it.
And so the real instigator of all of this was Acorn and other like-minded groups that were intimidating bank managers into giving bad loans.
Right.
And, I'm simplifying it, but that's basically the issue. And so we saw, they were a very large factor in the subprime mortgage crisis that led to a global recession.
I didn't know that part about it.
And so we're talking about organizations that have a long, destructive track record in effectively intimidating people into taking irrational positions on issues that they hold power to determine. So, these three women who were just elected to the House are open anti-Semites, right? They openly support BDS. They openly support the annihilation of Israel. Linda Sarsour, who is an out-and-out anti-Semite, she was just threatening Jews on the left, saying that they suffer from dual loyalties. And this anti-Semitism...
As if she doesn't suffer from a dual loyalty.
She doesn't, but she doesn't suffer from a dual loyalty. She has one loyalty.
Exactly. She's not loyal to America. That's what she's...
But the point, but who cares? I mean, that's just... She said, the point is this woman is trucking in open anti-Semitism against left-wing Jews. So this is sort of the thing where when they came first for the Jews who everybody's allowed to hate, the religious Jews, the right-wing Jews, people like Meir Kahane, right, who was murdered by a jihadi who was a member of the cell in Jersey City that did in fact attack and almost blew up the World Trade Center in 1993. And everybody looked at him and said, oh, he's a good guy because he killed Kahane, and he didn't even get charged for murder, even though he walked into a crowded room and shot him in cold blood. He got charged and convicted of mishandling a firearm, and nobody cared. There was no outcry because Meir Kahane, well, he's a racist Jew, and even the Israelis say that he's a racist and therefore he deserved to die. Right, and so they didn't want to stand up for Meir Kahane Zichrono Livracha when he was murdered. So then, they kept getting it and they kept getting it. And now, you have all of these left-wing Jews who are attacking Israel and joining the BDS movement and saying, oh no, we're not anti-Semites, we're Jews. We go to our synagogues all the time. We send our kids to all these Jewish day schools. Right. How dare you call us out? We just think that Jews in Judea and Samaria have no right to civil rights, they have no right to property rights, and we agree that they should be thrown out of polite society because they embarrass us. So we embarrass Peter Beinart and all of his colleagues on the left, and therefore we should be discriminated against. But lo and behold, the people who are at the forefront of discriminating against us are now being told that they have dual loyalties by their best buddy, Linda Sarsour, who's the head of their Democratic, who's taken a very, very powerful position in their party. And they want to continue to be part of it. Right. So, of course she's turning on them. Right. And, and they're going to continue to take it, I'll bet you, because, they don't
They'll take it till the end.
They'll take it, and they think that, and here's just one thing I want to say. There was an interesting, Rabbi Sachs, did I talk about this with you already?
No. Rabbi
Sachs, Lord Sachs, he writes these weekly interpretations of the Torah portion. So 2 weeks ago, or whatever it was, Toldot, it was about the story of...
He touched upon anti-Semitism.
You're right, it's about Isaac and Jacob and Esau and all the rest of it.
Jacob and Esau.
But it starts with the anti-Semitism of the Philistines against Isaac, right? That they were filling all of the wells that he opened with dirt. Right, so that they were hurting themselves as well as hurting him. They didn't care. They cut off their nose to spite their face.
Sounds very familiar. The Jews are doing something that also helps our Arab, Muslim, whatever neighbors, and then they hurt us.
One of the things that he talked about there, which was interesting, was that he quoted Hannah Arendt, who I don't usually like, but she made a point in I think in The Rise of Totalitarianism or something that he was quoting, and he said, look, her vital point was that the Jews in Germany and before that in France in the late 19th century weren't being attacked when they were powerful. They were attacked after they had already lost much of their power, which we don't remember. You said, for instance, the Jews had lost most of their, to the extent that Jews had controlling shares in German banks, that control ended well before the Nazis came to power, so that the Jews were already weak financially. They had already been stripped of most of their power in Germany by the time that the Nazis came around. And the same, he said, of the Jews in France with the Dreyfus persecution in 1897, right? That Captain Dreyfus was stripped of his rank and sent to Devil's Island as a spy in concocted charges, and the crowd was screaming death to the Jews when he was taken away. But this was after the French Jewish community had already lost most of the power that they had in the Third Republic. So this is a very key insight, right? And the insight here is that, are Jews in the United States as powerful today as they were 25 years ago? Do they have as much freedom in the United States as they did? Not when you look at the BDS movements on campuses that are intimidating a bunch of American Jewish kids to walk away from their Judaism, because why would they want to afflict themselves, place themselves in the firing line for Israel, particularly after they've been given disinformation about Israel for most of their school years by their own, Hebrew schools or by the media or by whomever. So why would, after not knowing anything to begin with about Israel, why would they then subject themselves to constant and continuous abuse by their anti-Semitic fellow students when they can just as easily walk away? And so, this is not a situation that held in the 1980s when I was at Columbia, where we also had, very significant anti-Israel forces operating on campus in the form of the Muslim Students Association and other groups that were trying to disrupt and attack the pro-Israel activities that I put together with my other pro-Israel activists on campus. We had a series of events that they tried to shut down. They shut down one of them, and that was sort of a decisive moment when the Jews stood up and said, "You can't do this again," and the administration sided with us. And they said, "No, you can't do that again." And they protected our operations, and a lot of the wind came out of the sails of the anti-Israel activists. I mean, it wasn't that they were gone, it's just that their plan and their campaign to do what's happening now, which was to disrupt and prevent the organization of pro-Israel meetings and speakers on campuses, failed. Right. Today at Columbia, the exact opposite is the case, where the administration is consistently siding with the anti-Semites against the Jewish students, so that the situation has flipped fundamentally. So obviously, the Jews, at least on Columbia College campus, were far more powerful in the sense that we had the administration on our side back in the day when I was there than they are today. And what is going on in Columbia is very similar to what's the situation on other campuses and throughout the United States. Jewish organizations, where are they? What was AIPAC's relative power in Washington in the 1980s and early 1990s to what it is today? It's like night and day. And so, they're opening themselves up for these attacks by clinging to the Democratic Party. What was it? 80% of American Jews voted Democrat in this month's election, as the Democrat Party is pushing forward open, out and out Jew haters. Right. And at the same time, the Jews themselves are leading the charge in libeling President Trump as an anti-Semite when he is demonstrably, as I pointed out in a speech that I gave at the beginning of the month in Dallas, that's up on YouTube now. He is demonstrably the most pro-Jewish pro-Israel and pro-Jewish president in American history. Mm-hmm. So, so they are, by their own hand, destroying their position in American society by siding with people who are open anti-Semites and by pushing away people who are not.
Right.
And so the Republicans have no reason to want to be friends with the Jews, and the Democrats hate them. So not all Democrats. The rising forces in the Democratic Party are anti-Semites.
Right.
And the Jews in the United States are siding with them against their own interests, and because they're trying to cling to an identity that abandoned them. So, this is a perfect storm, and Airbnb's operation, their open embrace of an anti-Semitic position. I mean, there's no way of getting around it. What they did with their boycott of Jews in Judea and Samaria is an openly, overtly discriminatory policy. And if it is allowed to pass in the United States, leaving aside the issue of boycotting and all of the rest of it, if this passes in the United States, if they're allowed to get away with this with the state pension funds and in courts with litigation, then what's happening now is that their move is officially going to deny Jews civil rights in the United States by saying that it is reasonable it is legal and it is acceptable for a company to adopt policies that are openly discriminatory against Jews as Jews. So I think, this is a key moment, and, American Jews, God bless them, have had lots of key moments, and they've dropped all of them, and they've ignored all of them. And, and it's very likely that they're going to ignore this one too, because after all, it's just the bad Jews like me and you,
right,
who live in Efrat, or who live in Ariel, or live in Ma'ale Adumim, who are, or Shiloh, who are offering our homes as rentals to tourists who want to come and vacation in this area and travel around this area. No. They're being told and that, by the way, let's just be very clear, right? This is also discriminatory against tourists, right? Especially Jewish tourists.
Right.
Because Jewish tourists aren't going to, particularly Jewish tourists who don't hate Israel, right? They're not going to want to, because it's only Israeli Jews who can't go into A and B, right? So an American Jew, let's call him Saul,
okay,
right? Saul from Queens. He and his wife Esther want to go on vacation, and they want to go and see the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron, right? Or the ancient site of the Ark of the Covenant in Shiloh, and they want to go and they want to stay in the vicinity of these places. So are they going to want to stay in Hamas-controlled city of Hebron?
Right. Which Airbnb will give them? They will give them their
right. They'll be able to do that.
Right. Right.
Or are they going to want to stay, in one of the Terranist villages by Shiloh? That the murderers of the family in Neve Tzuf came out of. I mean, are they going to want to do that?
Right. Those houses in Airbnb will show them.
Because those are the listings that they're going to get on Airbnb. So they're being denied their right to travel freely in a friendly country, in a territory that the United States has not determined the sovereign rights to,
right,
as a matter of national policy. And by the way, the Trump administration's position, as it's been expressed by senior administration officials, is that Jews shouldn't be expected to be thrown out of their homes here.
Right.
So, this is an openly anti-Semitic policy. It's anti-Semitic against Israeli Jews. It's anti-Semitic against non-Israeli Jews deliberately. And if they're allowed to get away with this because, the vast majority of the American Jewish community doesn't care, and they care more about the Democratic Party and remaining a member of this party even as it embraces and elects openly anti-Jewish politicians,
right,
then, they're going to find their rights increasingly constrained in the United States, just as Linda Sarsour wants.
Right. So 2 points then to finish this whole up. First of all, just for those of you who came in afterwards, Carolyn was talking about her analysis of the U.S. midterm elections. And basically you were saying, good that the never-Trumpers are gone from the Senate, good that the moderate Democrats in this election, and that's important that I'm pointing that out, in this election overcame the progressive radical left. But the worrying thing...
In competitive races.
In competitive races. But the worrying thing is that... one second.
Are we off the air?
No. Is that the 3 openly anti-Semitic Democrats were elected in, and that's basically a sign of a concern of the direction the Democratic Party is going in the future.
Right, and again, I just saw the lead story in Politico yesterday was that identity politics are being adopted by the leading contenders for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020.
Wow.
Now, what are identity politics? One of the key aspects of identity politics is anti-Semitism.
Right.
Because in their whole concept of intersectionality, right, you have to be friends with everybody who's considered to be a victim. And the identity politicians in the United States, the activists for identity politics, are avowed anti-Semites. And so they say that Israel is an oppressor and must be an oppressor, and they're not open. I mean, the idea of identity politics that's so pernicious is that it says it doesn't matter who you are as an individual. It doesn't matter what you actually do. We've decided, the grand poobahs of identity politics, these radical communists, have decided that Israel is part of the oppressor class. The United States is part of the oppressor class. The Palestinians are part of the victim class. The Chinese are part of the victim class, whatever it happens to be. And so it doesn't matter what the facts are. Israel no Hasbara operation that gives people the facts about, the Palestinians and their desire to annihilate Israel and Israel's national rights in Judea and Samaria. None of this is important.
Right.
This is an impermeable obstacle because it rejects intellectual argument and evidence in favor of a twitch, right? In favor of prejudice. So white males are this way, white females are that way, black males are this way, black females are this way, and you're not allowed to be anything else. And so the identity politics claim that Israelis and Jews who support them are pernicious, inherently. Israel is evil, inherently. Zionism is necessarily a form of racism, and racism is a chief source of suffering and misery in the world. And therefore, the headline says it all. If, Cory Booker or Kamala Harris or even, a white male is chosen as the Democratic nominee, to the extent that the identity politics are going to be a driving force of their message and of their platform, then that means that whole hog, the Democratic Party is now embracing anti-Semitism. And, again, it doesn't matter that the constituents in the United States are not supportive of that. It doesn't matter that Democratic voters are not necessarily anti-Semites at all, and overwhelmingly are not.
Right.
By all survey data.
Right.
Because the driving forces pushing their party to adopt this plank or that plank, this position or that position on Israel, on Jews, on Jewish civil rights in the United States, on college campuses and throughout the country are anti-Semites.
Now here's the kicker. White Americans today who are siding with this identity politics, radical leftist thinking, it's not just about anti-Semitism. In the end, they're going to get eaten up by the monster that they're building up. Just this week, I don't know if you saw this, there was an interview on CNN, okay? So there was the interviewer, 2 white CNN correspondents, pundits, and a black woman. And somehow they were talking about white females, if they should be considered white females as part of the oppressed identity of females today, right? What did this white female CNN correspondent say? Well, white females can't be, and she's a white female, right? She's a leftist white female. White female women who vote Trump can't be considered part of the oppressed identity of females because they are supporting the patriarchy by being married to white males, by having white sons who are part of the patriarchy. So white females who support Trump are not part of the oppressed female identity. That is the level where they're going, and that same white female CNN correspondent will be eaten up by the identity politics that she right now is throwing out her fellow white females at with the trash. Am I onto this point?
So, 2 points on that. The first one is, who wants to be a victim? I mean, that's one of the things that drives me so crazy about the whole identity politics thing. It's like, were we born with some sort of an aspiration for people to screw us? To be weak, to be helpless, to be vulnerable, to be open to attack? I wasn't. I'm not raising my kids to want to be victims. I'm raising them to not want to be victims.
100%.
And so there's something deeply diseased about the entire concept that it's good to be a victim, or that victimhood is a moral force. It's not. It's a terrible thing, and people should do everything that they can to not either be labeled or actually be victims. Right. This isn't something we should be teaching our children to aspire to. And the other thing is just, you go back to what Linda Sarsour wrote the other day, which is that progressive Jews suffer from dual loyalty because they support Israel, and Israel is evil. And, I saw that thing actually on Real Clear Politics. The woman, Kirsten something, she used to be on Fox. She was like their liberal commentator. Now she's on CNN. She's just gone nuts, right? But, what she's saying is exactly what they've been saying. I mean, she is sort of the white Christian version of Jewish Voice for Peace, which is a Jewish organization that's dedicated to demonizing Jews and siding with the enemies of the Jews against the Jews, and doing it as Jews so that they get they make it easier for these people who are anti-Jewish, the BDS movement, the Linda Sarsours of the world, to be attacked and vilified as anti-Semites. And by the way, you see this is the Pittsburgh massacre really energized a lot of these former conservatives who have no political home, who are at the beck and call of the left that is anti-Semitic. And you saw that a lot of them latched on to this idea that they should be at the forefront, like Barry Weiss from the New York Times, and Bret Stephens, my former boss at the Jerusalem Post, the guy who hired me to the Jerusalem Post, latching onto this lie that Trump bore responsibility for the massacre in Pittsburgh.
Horrible.
And Barry Weiss gave this incredibly horrific interview on Bill Maher, which should go down in history as one of the most shameful moments of American Jewish life. She came on, we learned that she's originally from Pittsburgh, and that her father was the head of one of the denuded communities that now shares a space with two others in a synagogue that used to only belong to one community because the Pittsburgh Jewish community is shrinking, right? So her father was once the president of one of the synagogues that operates there. And he knew a lot of the victims, and she remembered some of them. So she comes on Bill Maher and sort of presents her as like this high priestess. She's about to kill something in the temple. Like she's a real religious authority, this young woman.
An editor of the op-ed section of the New York Times.
Whatever. So she comes on. She's like the high priestess of American Jewry. And she speaks very paternalistically and patronizingly about American Jews. And, in this voice oozing with moral certainty and superiority. And Bill Maher is eating it all up and is giving her all of the credibility that, should confer to a high priestess of Judaism. And she sits there and she says, I understand a lot of Jews and, some of my friends really like some of the things that Trump has done, like moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And, she gave a couple of other really huge things that Trump has done. She says, yeah, but they have to understand that if they support Trump because he does things that they like, then they're supporting a man who's destroying everything they are. Where is the evidence of this incredible slander? Not only against Trump, but of the capacity of her fellow Jews to make rational decisions. Her statement was a call to obliterate reason on behalf of political twitches, right? That's what it was. Political convenience. She's now being paid by the left She's a hired gun of the New York Times. These are her masters, and she's going to run around and make these ludicrous statements whose job is to demoralize American Jewry, to make them believe that they cannot be moral and stand up for their own rights. Okay? This was one of the worst examples of this of where this moral preening by people who lost their moral compass is taking the American Jewish community. They're just confusing them into believing that they don't have a right to appreciate people who stand with them. They don't have a right, as if they want to claim that they're moral, then they must screw their friends and stand with their enemies who are trying to deny them civil rights and trying to deny the Jewish people the right to freedom in their country. So, I had thought, she had written an article like last year or something like that against Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory and these other anti-Semites who are now presenting themselves as the head of the women's movement in the United States. And she got a lot of plaudits for it, and everybody thought, oh, this is great, and very wise.
Because she called them out.
She called them out for it. But now, she's joined them. Right. Even if she pretends that she's opposing them, what she's saying, in effect, is telling Jews that they have no place to go except into the waiting arms of these witches who want to take away Jewish civil rights in the United States and want to end American support for Israel. And not out of love for the United States, but out of hatred for Jews. And, she just is a disgraceful human being for having done so. And of course, she's not alone. And you go back to this Airbnb, and what are they doing? What is this whole BDS thing? Which, we're just against the settlements. They're saying that they're blaming the Jews. Oh, but they don't blame all of the Jews. No. They're going to let the Barry Weisses and the Brett Stevens and the Max Boots and the Jennifer, what's her name, in the Washington Post, and all of the rest of them, plus of course the Jews who are anti-Israel openly, on college campuses and in American, J Street, they're gonna be nice to them, but they're blaming everything on the Jews who are on the right in the United States now. They came out with these calls. Franklin Foer led the way, calling for Jews to be excommunicated if they support President Trump, that they shouldn't have their charitable donations accepted by synagogues, and they shouldn't be allowed to be members of synagogues if they support Trump. And of course, they're supporting the BDS against the Jews, the inconvenient, the religious fanatic Jews who live in Judea and Samaria and in Jerusalem and the West, and the Golan Heights or whatever. We're responsible for everything, and they're latching on to this incredible Jew hatred to try to clean themselves so that they can keep holding on for dear life to the left that hates them. And it's sick. And again, Airbnb, it's not the first, and it won't be the last. Certainly won't be the last if it's not met with harsh, immediate, painful action. And again, not just boycott, but actual litigation that takes millions of dollars out of the pockets of these Jew haters. And I would also sue Human Rights Watch. I would look into a way to sue Human Rights Watch over this thing. Because if they're the people who are doing this, and they should pay a price, not just that I'm not going to give you donations anymore, but that you're actively facilitating, propagating human rights abuses, but even forget about human rights, anti-Jewish discrimination. You are an anti-Jewish organization. You're inviting, you're propagating, you're inciting Jew hatred and anti-Jewish actions. And these groups should be made to pay a serious financial price. And again, it's not just, okay, we're not going to give money to Human Rights Watch anymore. Okay, we're going to boycott Airbnb. Or even, okay, we're going to open up a competitor to Airbnb. All of these things are good, but they have to be hit in court with serious litigation because they're anti-Semites. Now, if you look at the way that the Democratic Party is going, and you look at the fact that these Jewish intellectuals, these Jewish activists, are attacking the best friend the Jews have ever had in the White House, Donald Trump, and doing everything that they can to stay in a party that, is increasingly radicalized. Look, I think I wrote that article about what the elections mean, I did something that I tried never to do, which is that I wanted to believe something. So I wrote it. I think I knew deep down that I was being overly optimistic and hopeful about the Democratic Party. But then when you see the sit-ins that in Nancy Pelosi's office and in other, I don't know that she's so moderate, but in moderate Democratic congressmen's offices, and you see where the energy is in the party, and you see, Linda Sarsour continues to rise, and Louis Farrakhan continues to rise in this party. And at the same time that these people are attacking Donald Trump, I mean, the fact that Kirsten Gillibrand, a senator from New York State, has embraced Linda Sarsour repeatedly and publicly. If that isn't a cause for worry, I don't know what is a cause for worry.
Right. And on that note, the other point I wanted to make is I believe the future of much of American cities is going to be what Portland, Oregon looks like today. I don't know if you've been following. Antifa has been extremely vocal and active on the streets. Violence in the streets by leftist activist mobs of leftist Antifa activists. And that is, if they're not stopped and the Democratic Party continues to embrace and enable that to grow, that modus operandi in Portland is going to replicate in other cities.
After they mobbed Tucker Carlson's house, and I think that this was a very significant thing. Like him, hate him, whatever. I mean, there are things that he says that I think are right. There are things that he says that I think are wrong. I always think that his voice is interesting. He has a great program. But they mobbed his house.
Yeah.
And they mobbed his house when he was at the studio. I mean, they weren't even going after him. They were terrorizing his family.
Yeah.
They did the same thing to Kirstjen Nielsen, the Secretary of Homeland Security. They did the same thing to Secretary of Labor. They did it obviously to Sarah Huckabee. Yeah, I mean they're doing it now to Democrats. They're doing it to moderate Democrats, and nobody's stopping them.
Right.
Nobody's stopping them, and they're claiming and so when after they did this to Tucker Carlson's family, Matthew Iglesias, who's a fairly big voice on the left, I don't remember where he was writing for. Was it Vanity Fair? Where he's worked for some marquee publications, and he has a very large following on Twitter and other places and social media. He wrote a tweet that said and that legitimized him. So, well, that's a strategy. It's a strategy. It's a political strategy. Intimidation. It's true. It's a strategy. It was used by the Nazis. It was used by the KGB. I mean, it is. It's a strategy. It is a totalitarian strategy.
Exactly.
A totalitarian worldview that says that anybody with deviant thoughts is to be attacked and punished in their homes.
Right. That's really, and that's scary. And again, it's because it's become legitimized. And here they say they're allowed to do this because they're fighting the fascists, right? They say we're the anti-fascists, but their actions, they are the ones who are actually acting like fascists by shutting down anyone they disagree with in these totalitarian
ways. Which again, goes back to my wishful thinking, and gee, I hope it wasn't. I hope that I don't have to tell I don't have to do mea culpa on that thing for too long, and that the Democratic Party really does come to its senses. And by the way, if the Jews want to stay in the Democratic Party, more power to them, but they should do that as fighting for their rights.
Fighting for their rights and fighting for the moderates and not the progressives.
They should be openly attacking these people and going out of their way to discredit every politician that accepts money from these anti-Semitic groups. They should be in the trenches of the party fighting hand-to-hand combat against all of these people who are for intersectionality, who are pushing Democratic presidential aspirants to embrace identity politics that are anti-Semitic. They should be the ones fighting this fight. But that's not what we're seeing. We see them instead taking the lead in slandering President Trump as an anti-Semite.
Right.
It's a very fight, and I want to see them fighting fighting this Airbnb boycott of Jews. Let's
Right.
see that happen. I mean, they have a lot of power if they want to use it. The problem is that they don't want to use it. They want to not use their power.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. No, you make a great point that if they want to stay in the Democratic Party, they should be the ones that are spearheading the fight against all this anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party
be me and you.
and the progressives within
It
the party.
should be them. This is their job.
Right. And they're not. They're siding with the progressives, which means they're all going to go down with a sinking ship. All right. Can we touch very quickly on the Israeli politics or no?
Why don't we leave that till next week? I think the main thing, and I'm writing an article about it for Breitbart now that should I hope either today or tomorrow. Which is just that the most interesting thing about all of the coalition crisis and the fact that this government is likely not to last until November, and if we're not gonna have no elections in March, we'll have them in May.
Yeah.
Is that the left have been totally out of this because the Israeli left,
Right. The Israeli left
is no longer a significant political force in Israel because they've discredited themselves so completely, not only in everything having to do with national security, where they've proven over and over and over again that they can't be trusted, but they're all for boycotts. They want to boycott religious, social conservatives, the right. They want to boycott free marketers. So basically, even if Yair Lapid, Yesh Atid, got the most mandates in the next Knesset, he'd never be able to form a government because all they've been doing the past 10 years is telling everybody how much they hate them. So they're not going to be able to form a coalition. And, and they've become more and more radicalized, like we saw with their whole rejection of the nation-state law, right? So national security, boycotts, anti-Israel positions, nobody is going to want them. So this whole thing has been arguments inside of the Israeli right, in and amongst themselves, and center-right party, more to the right party, Likud party. There's no, it's left-wing politicians. They're interviewed, they're asked their positions, they give statements, but as a political sport, as a political power, they're spent, which is why they spend almost all of their energies, time, and effort in empowering the fourth estate of the bureaucracy and the deep state to try to force right-wing governments to enact their policy.
Right. So, can I ask you one question? Someone just asked a very important question. They said he is being attacked by people he knows, by friends of his, saying that Trump is a Nazi supporter. How do you respond to that?
It's a lie. It's a lie. And you just have to call them out and say there's literally no truth, that is a slander, and that calling Trump a Nazi is like calling you a Nazi. There's equal amount of supporting evidence for both contentions, 0. And therefore, you just have to stand up to them and tell them to be ashamed of themselves. And if you want to get a list of all of the things that Trump has done for Israel and for the American Jewish community, I lay it all out in, I think, boring detail, but whatever, in the speech that I gave earlier this month in Dallas. It's on my Facebook page, it's on my website, and just check it out and plagiarize at will. Just take what I say and just stand up to them because they're lying, and they're lying in a way that is, again, I think that it's both manipulative and it's it's a lie that is being expressed in order to make it impossible for you as a Jew to stand up for yourself. Because one of the basic foundations of a capacity to stand up for yourself is to recognize your friends from your enemies and side with your friends and against your enemies. So what they're trying to do with these attacks against Trump is to say you're not allowed to actually recognize and stand with the people who are supporting your rights. And if you can't do that, then you're stuck, you're exposed, you got no friends, you've got nobody to stand with you, you've got nobody to stand with and help you defend yourself against the likes of the left-wing anti-Semites who are saying that you have no right to civil rights.
I had a very deep conversation with someone very close to me. Very close to me. Here, I'm a proud settler, Judea and Samaria. He knows that. He comes here and visits.
Yes, in the suburban community, in the wealthy suburb of Efrat, yeah, we're all living out in caravans, and twisting our mustaches, trying to figure out, how we build another mobile home.
So this is an American who I very much respect in many ways, and then when the conversation comes to American politics, to Trump's an anti-Semite because. Do you remember what he said at Charlottesville? That's why he's an anti-Semite. He won't talk to me about the anti-Semitism on the left. No anti-Semitism on the left. Trump is an anti-Semite because he said there are good people on both sides when it came to Charlottesville. He is enabling anti-Semitism.
Right, as opposed to, and again, the hypocrisy, it's so deep that it's sick, because Trump made a statement that was, I defended his statement in an article because I think that it wasn't even looked at in a rational way. The Antifa people are incredibly violent and intimidating and anti-Semitic, but now I lost my train of thought.
What you wrote defending what
no, but but Barack Obama whitewashed anti-Semitism for 8 years.
Yeah. And
one of the most profound examples of it, which we shouldn't forget ever, is after 5 Jews were massacred in a kosher market, right, in the Heap of Kasher in Paris on a Friday afternoon shopping for Shabbat, Orthodox Jews one and all, after they were murdered for being Jews by Al-Qaeda, ISIS terrorists, he called them a bunch of guys in a deli. He refused to acknowledge that they were killed as Jews because they were Jews. And by the way, he did it in a more fundamental ideological way in 2009 in his speech at Al-Azhar University, the University of Cairo, where he wiped Jewish history in the land of Israel out of the historical record, compared the Palestinians to Jews in the Holocaust, and attributed to them achievements that never occurred, while essentially accepting the Iranian narrative that Israel is a colonialist implant in an otherwise Islamic world by rights. And this was, it was a theft. It was a cultural appropriation in the deepest sense of the word, where he ignored and wiped away Jewish history, which is pure anti-Semitism. And he was never, all of these Jews who are calling Trump an anti-Semite for no reason, have been silent about what Obama did. They were silent about it for 8 years. And again, if you're only fighting one kind of anti-Semitism and you're letting all of the rest of the anti-Semitism rage and become more and more powerful, then you're enabling anti-Semitism. You're not fighting it. When you only see anti-Semites on the right, and you see anti-Semites on the right where they don't even exist, while turning a blind eye or two blind eyes to the raging and mass galloping anti-Semitism on the left, you're enabling it. And you're not fighting anti-Semitism. You're enabling people who hate you to become more powerful so that they can hate you more effectively.
That is the truth. We will end with that. Caroline, thank you so much, as usual, for your insight.
And thank you guys for watching.
Yes, thank you for watching. Everyone, go to CarolineGlick.com, sign up for Caroline's newsletter. You'll get all of her stuff where she writes everywhere. And it's really, really important, really critical. It should be a good, safe week, Caroline.
Amen, amen.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching.